Dragonage the Veilguard. It's been 10 years since the Game of the Year and BioWare, the much maligned BioWare, are trying to make a comeback in what feels like their last chance at holding on to consumers' trust if they haven't lost it all already. At least with the Dragonage series. The game has already found much controversy online. Watch any video about it, and the comments are split into multiple factions. A lot of folks aren't sure about the art style. It appears very cartoonish and saturated, very bright, which is a stark contrast to earlier games in the series like Dragon Age Origins, where the graphics were very dark and grounded, reflecting the darker tones in the story. So, these comments display the lack of trust that fans have in BioWare after their recent launches, such as Anthem and in Mass Effect Andromeda. And this lack of trust is well placed. It's clear that fans want to like this, however, because they are still interacting with it. And I think that is the best point in BioWare's favor, is that fans are not apathetic. They do still care, they just want to see a good game, and they haven't seen much of a reason to feel positive yet. However, after the first Dragon Age the Veilguard trailer released, they have released more content and said more about how the game does have a darker tone. Even though the art style is much brighter than earlier games in the series, the game appears to still have those really tough, powerful decisions and darker tones in the stories that fans of the Dragon Age series are used to. So fans want to like this, but it's clear that they don't have any reason to. And I wanted to make a video to discuss what the game's upcoming Halloween release will look like, and whether you should be optimistic or not. Now, BioWare. They have lost our trust, as I said. There's no denying it. And they're in cahoots with EA, which makes perception even worse. Now, to start, the game is listed at $60, which shows a sign of good faith on EA and BioWare's part. They understand that they're working from below. They have a tall hill to climb. And I think that's a great start for them to not list it at $70, even though it seems like it may be a worthy experience worthy of $70. They're still knocking it down $10 to show consumers, hey, we messed up. We're going to mark this at $60 as an act of good faith. It shows a bit of self-awareness, which is something that isn't to be expected from them based on their past. Now, the first trailer that released confused folks because it took a lighter tone, like I was saying, and then later trailers, as well as dialogue interviews, took a much darker tone. It sounds like that darker tone is what they're settling for, even if the art style kind of contradicts that. It's still the Dragon Age dark, serious tone underneath it all. It reminds me of Avowed, but reversed, like I was saying. With Dragon Age specifically, though, the darker tone would resonate much more with fans of the previous entries in the series, so I think there's some encouragement in that they're going in that direction. But just to elaborate on Avowed a little more, they released that first trailer, and it was very dark and gritty. It looked a lot like Dragon Age of old. But that got a lot of excitement. You know, fans were loving the idea of that. People just were really looking forward to that game. And then after that, trailers that have been released, gameplay, dev discussions, all appear to have taken on a more cartoonish feel, just like what's going on with Dragon Age, but the reverse. The only difference is that Dragon Age is more of an already established IP. It's something that has been grounded in darker tones for a long time, so to shift away from that with the art style is a very risky move. But I do respect that they're trying something different. A lot of people have speculated that it could have been the style that they were going for when it was potentially going to be a live service game. And the way that combat works does sort of have that feel. You know, it has a lot of flashiness, saturation, kind of like something like Suicide Squad. There's a lot of colors popping, stuff like that. So I can see where that argument makes sense. And then Avowed, like I was saying, it's not as monumental, the tone they're going for, because, those games are based off of Pillars of Eternity, and those were more top-down, CRPG-style games. But this game that they're releasing now is going to be a first-person game, Avowed. So what Dragon Age is doing is a lot more risky, but I think change is warranted, and I appreciate that they're going for big change in many places. So I want to start with Dragon Age Origins here. It's a game I have mixed feelings about, and after replaying it recently, I've decided it doesn't hold up as well as I remember, and it's a hard one to be immersed in. My last video was about how zen Resident Evil 3 Remake feels, and Dragon Age Origins doesn't allow you to be very zen, in my opinion. Not just because of the graphics, that's not a real player in the element of zen, I feel. It's more, how well the story is told, how likable the companions are, and how well the actual second-to-second, minute-to-minute gameplay feels. And while Dragon Age Origins has a pretty great story and the characters are interesting enough, the gameplay really does falter enough to take you out of the game, and it just doesn't feel good the way it's balanced. There are still plenty of bugs in the game that really take you out of it. So, again, I just wanted to circle back to this because as a kid, I started that game over 10 times, and I've never finished it. It was a heck of a journey every time, and I couldn't believe how different the origins were and how much everything connected, and how the choices affected the story, and how the characters could leave you, or affect the story as well based on your dialogue or their particular interactions with the NPCs. And so I've recently replayed it and finally beat it this time. And most of that still holds true. It is still infinitely replayable, at least to a certain point, and the choices and characters do come together to make Dragon Age Origins a true RPG that most games can't claim to be these days. I can see where Baldur's Gate 3 took its inspirations from what BioWare was doing, because they really knew, if nothing else, how to craft a true RPG that makes you feel like every little movement you're making is causing a butterfly effect and changing things in that world. Replaying it was still one of the best RPG experiences I've had to date. This game was praised at the time, and on top of the world, which is crazy because of how BioWare is essentially a meme now for, dropping the ball and, forgetting their roots. So replaying this game really reminded me of how much they could learn from their past and bring that into Dragon Age the Veilguard. So one thing I immediately think about is the combat, because like I was saying in Dragon Age Origins upon my replay, that was what I struggled with most. I like Dragon Age Origins more than Inquisition because it feels more focused and it knows what it wants to be, whereas Inquisition sort of felt like it was trying to modernize something that is hard to modernize. It was trying to do something like Baldur's Gate 3 did successfully. Combat has never been a selling point of the Dragon Age series, though. But it is on people's mind because, if anything, it's been a hesitation, especially with Inquisition's combat not holding up well at all, and a lot of folks noting that. But my key point here is that Dragon Age Inquisition actually felt worse to me than Dragon Age Origins after replaying it. I also want to talk about Knights of the Old Republic, my favorite BioWare series. I'm not even the biggest fan of Star Wars, but the story, the twist, the characters, and the worlds in KOTOR were amazing. The game doesn't hold up graphically, or combat-wise necessarily, but after replaying it 2 years ago, I can say that it still holds up in terms of story and the impact it will have on you as the player. I just remember the first time I learned the twist at the end of the game. Wow, that blew my mind. And almost never have I felt as interesting as a main character. I couldn't believe the revelation. I don't want to spoil it, but those who know. And KOTOR is a game I would really like Dragonage the Inquisition, Dragonage the Veilguard to be modeled after. The most, I'd say, in terms of the impactful writing, the characters, the ability to make you as the player really feel like, holy cow, what have I done? What is going on right now? I think Mass Effect also does this really well, where you're Commander Shepard, you're making decisions with your squad mates, you're sending them out, you're disagreeing with them, sometimes even fighting with them, killing them because they're going to jeopardize the mission. You really feel like you as Commander Shepard are making life or death decisions, and sometimes that really does play out in the game. I want to see that kind of impact in Dragonage the Veilguard. Same thing in Origins, of course. Certain companions will leave you, or they'll even fight you on the spot if they morally disagree with you. I want to see that again, because I think that's what BioWare does so well, or has done so well, is make that true RPG experience. I do want to circle back to Knights of the Old Republic's combat, because I did say that it doesn't hold up, but I also don't think it plays terribly. You have to be patient with the combat, but it knows what it does. The stat-based attacking is frustrating at times, but you know what you're in for. And they made the actual animations interesting enough that while you're just pressing a button here and there, or managing your party while you're fighting, it's interesting to watch. The lightsaber duels look like something you might see in the movies. They're awesome. The animations aren't super varied, but what you can watch is very fun to see. And I know that Dragonage the Veilguard has progressed much beyond that point, but I am glad to see that based on in the trailers, what I'm seeing, they still understand that combat is a spectacle, and that's something that they've been very good at in the past, whether it's any of their big 3 series. Combat is just fun to watch and partake in. But back to Dragonage Veilguard. Early impressions, early previews, a lot of folks online are saying that it appears completely different in terms of combat. In terms of me, my first concern wasn't really combat. It was more about, how good of a story are they going to tell? What is monetization going to look like? But I do care about combat quite a bit, because I'd say that the Dragon Age combat is my least favorite of the 3 main series they make. So, obviously they talk about the reduction just to 2 companions, and I personally wasn't worried about that, but it does create less opportunities for, more interesting interactions. I've been replaying Mass Effect, and having 2 companions there, it really doesn't make that much of a difference from Origins, which I've also recently replayed. I really think that 2 companions will be just fine. I don't think people need to worry about that. But as far as the actual, creation of your character and so forth, a lot of folks have said that it's very complex, and it's a good one. There's a lot of options you can make. There's the 3 classes, warrior, rogue, and mage. The combat itself really seems to play out like, it seems like it has some sort of Assassin's Creed elements to it. It's sort of flashy, in some of the newer Assassin's Creed games, It's very flashy. And then there's also some elements of, games like Bayonetta, Final Fantasy 16. It's very, flashy with very subtle tactical elements. You see in the previews, they pull up the the wheel of spells, and you can control your companions that way and so forth. In terms of the 3 different classes, it looks like they're varied enough. There's a lot of different gameplay options, whether they're playing as a rogue, a warrior, or a mage. Gameplay looks totally different, and then the new dodging mechanic also adds an interesting element to the characters, especially if you're a rogue. It sounds like that's going to be a very feasible mechanic and something you're going to do often, and it'll really make you feel like you're playing a quick, fast-paced rogue. Another big change that they're implementing is the fact that you can't control your companions like you can in Dragon Age Origins and Inquisition. You can't really take control of them. You can make choices, but you can't full-on just take control of them. You can direct them, towards where to fire and so forth. But it seems like the shortcuts in the radial menu really, they seem like they're implemented well, for instance. So it seems like even though you can't directly control them, you'll still be able to, kind of have a commander role, sort of like in Mass Effect, which you can control them in, but you can direct them to a degree. A lot of folks have said that it feels kind of like God of War in terms of the combat, as well as how it's, taking places in linear portions, and then it's kind of episodic. So that's an interesting change. I didn't feel that way in Inquisition. Inquisition was very much, an open world experience, and Origins was very much a, load into this zone and you can walk around in there, but it still wasn't very linear, like a God of War style. God of War had its open elements as well, so I would say Dragon Age, Inquisition, and God of War, kind of had similar worlds, so I'm not worried about that. I think that linearity allows them to be more focused and to tell more interesting and, impactful stories rather than trying to make an open world game, which, as we all know, me specifically, and I know a lot of others, are pretty fatigued on open world. We want to see just handcrafted, well-told stories. So what are my closing thoughts? Well, I am excited for the game. I'm not a Dragon Age super fan, so just understand I'm coming from that perspective. But I am excited for the game. I think the graphics look really fun and entertaining. I like the flashiness, Again, it sort of has like an MMO element flashiness to it, something like New World, which I haven't really played much, but it's kind of akin to that. It looks like a lot of fun, though. I think that the characters sound like they're interesting. A lot of folks that went to the early impressions of the game seem to be very positive about your interactions with characters and how the story seemed and the companions and so forth, so I'm very excited for that. I think that the art style, it just looks really good and interesting. I haven't seen anything quite like it, where it's dark, cartoony. It's just striking a chord for me that I particularly will have a lot of interest in and be excited for. I'm excited for them to see how far back to their roots they can go, how much of their past games they incorporate. The lack of monetization as well as the $60 price tag gives me a lot of hope that they'll be able to reincarnate some of the best traits of these games that I replay so much and that I love. I'm hoping to experience something like I did when I played Mass Effect, Knights of the Old Republic, for the first time. Dragon Age Origins, of course, too. It is the Dragon Age series after all, but yeah, I'm looking forward to this one, and I guess we'll check in after it's released, but I'm hoping everyone enjoyed the video. My second video here, so I thank you so much for watching, and like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. But I will see you in the next video. Thank you, guys.